All right, hey, what's up, everybody? So I'm going to try and actually make this quick. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but we're going to see if it actually does. There are two parts to this video. The first is a response to a question that was incited by last week's video, which I'm excited about. The second is an interesting thought that has come up because of last week's video during the course of this week. So let's dive right into it so that you can get back to other things that you need to be doing. The first is the question that came up was, so just a quick refresher, what we talked about last week was it's important not to just rely on what somebody else says in terms of like religion, like not just take this person's word for it or like rely on their belief or their faith, but rather have your own so that you can check what you're hearing here against what you're hearing from God, right? That's kind of the idea. Well, it was brought up very astutely. Well, if you have a direct connection with God, what does this guy need? Why do we have this guy? What's with the third party? And without seeming trite and without sort of making the question seem unimportant, because I think it is a very important question, and there's a lot more to it than this. But I think in a nutshell, for me, having somebody who is dedicated to the discovery of spiritual things, right, is a benefit for me because it helps me know what questions I should be asking, what things I should be worried about. It's the same thing as like I'm not going to try and teach myself like Muay Thai. I'm not even though I could. It's a little bit different because there's if I had access to the source of Muay Thai, it might be a little bit different. But still, that it doesn't quite work the same way. Even if it was, if I did, if I had like a phone call connection with the source, the guy that came up with Muay Thai, that'd be awesome. But I still would need my trainer, just like to show it in action, and even more importantly, to help display the path and say, look, if this is where you're headed, this is where I was headed, if this is where you're headed, let me just tell you that these are some things you're going to run into because I've walked this road, I've hiked this trail, been there before. It's the same reason why we have, at least I see it as the same reason why we have instructors at universities, right? Why we have, fitness instructors, people that dedicate their time to becoming experts in and really just studying out particular principles and concepts so that we can focus on what we want to focus on and still gain access to some of those deeper questions because there are people that are dealing with those things. So like I said, I know that's kind of the short answer. It doesn't really get into the deep intricacies of the question. But that's kind of my response. Now, the second half of this video, I want to talk about logic for a second. Logic is something that is incredibly misunderstood. Logic and rationality, very, very misunderstood in the world. There's not a whole lot of people who use logical statements correctly. And so I want to kind of break some things down. I want to explain some things very simply, very basically. And hopefully we can make some progress on this whole thing. So I'm going to teach you really quickly a very important, like this is Logic 101, like the first hour of the first day of Logic 101. This is very, very simple stuff, which is the reason why I can teach it because that's like all that I remember. But the idea is there's a very simple statement in logic, which is if A is true, then B is true. Okay, if A, then B. Now, although this is one of the most simple and straightforward statements in logic, it's very often confused because sometimes people will say, okay, well, if A is true, then B is true. All right, so we'll accept that. Well, B is true. That means A must be true. I'll give you an example. If it's raining outside, I'm going to take my umbrella outside. Right? That's a perfectly reasonable statement to make, and it follows the structure. If it's raining outside, then I will take my umbrella outside. Now consider the following statement. I am taking my umbrella outside. Now, many of you will instantly assume that it's raining outside. Right? Number one, based on common sense, but number two, based on the statement that I just made, which is if it's raining, I'm going to take my umbrella. Well, I'm taking my umbrella outside. The problem is I could take my umbrella outside for any number of reasons. I could take it outside because it's too sunny. I could take it outside because it's wet and it's damp and it's getting moldy. I need to dry it out. I could take it outside because I want to throw it away. Right? So it's very important when we're dealing with these logical statements that we're approaching them correctly. So we can't assume that it's raining just because I take my umbrella outside. However, if the first statement is true, if it's raining, then I'll take my umbrella outside. and I don't take my umbrella outside, then we can conclude that it's not raining. Do you follow me so far? We can conclude that it's not raining, because if it was raining, I would take my umbrella outside, but I'm not taking my umbrella outside. Okay? So based on that if-then statement, you can prove the second half of the statement if the first half is true. And you can disprove that the first half is true by disproving that the second half is true. But you can't do anything else with that statement. Okay? You can't prove that A is true by proving that B is true. And you can't prove that B is not true if A is not true. Because in the same way, if I said, you know, I could, like I said, I could take my umbrella outside for a reason other than it being raining, right? So it could not be raining, but I could still take my umbrella outside, right? That's kind of what I mentioned first. So the whole reason I bring that up is because there are a lot of principles in religions that rely on that same pattern. If you X, Y, Z, then you will be da da da. A lot of times, especially in Mormon culture, it's about blessings. If you do these things, you'll be blessed in these ways, or you'll just be blessed. The important thing to remember, though, is that a lot of times it's we kind of get the cart before the horse sometimes, and we'll look at sort of the end goal. Like there's a scripture that talks about if you have faith, hope, and charity, then you will always abound in good works, right? So we tend to focus a lot of our energy on the good works part. I got to do the good things. I got to do the things that are considered good in order to be able to claim having faith, hope, and charity. Ironically enough, though, if we were to just focus all of our energy on attaining faith, on being faithful and really having faith, and on hoping in the future, hoping in what's going to happen, and then having real love for people around us, real love, not being nice to each other, not saying mean things, but really loving the people around you and really just putting yourself out there for them. The good works that you're trying so hard to do would happen as a byproduct of who you've become. And I think that's the important thing for today is too often we'll focus on the monotony and the mundane, the results of who we're trying to become, as opposed to just becoming what we're trying to become and letting it wash over who we are and become the very essence of who we are. And so we just act naturally, right? I think that's the thing that catches people up so often, is that, especially in the Mormon church, we talk about the natural man, right? The natural man is an enemy to God. But I don't think that means the man who acts naturally, having faith, hope, and charity, is an enemy to God. I think what that means is when you allow yourself to be overcome by your baser instincts that are not, that don't have the well-being of others or even the well-being of yourself in mind, that's where it becomes an enemy to God. But I don't think it means what we think it means, right? It's like that line from Princess Bride. I don't think that phrase means what we think it means, because I think, and I truly, truly believe this, that we should act as naturally as we can always. And if our natural actions, if what we would naturally do, if the things that we just, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to do, if those things are not the things that we want to be doing, it's not the things that need to change, it's us. It's our being, it's who we are. Because if who we are is the type of person who does the things that we want to do, then it just becomes natural. Today we talked a lot about sharing the gospel, sharing Christianity, sharing the message, right? A lot of times, especially for Mormons, that's really awkward. And most of the reason why it's awkward is because we try and force it. We try and oh, you want to hear about the Mormon church? As opposed to just being who you are, being faithful, being somebody who's not afraid or not ashamed, not in the sense of not being, again, putting it out there and bringing things up and making it awkward. But if you're not ashamed, somebody asks you a question, you're not ashamed to answer the question, that is faith. That is true faith. That hope and that understanding and that desire to step back and say, look, you know what? You probably think this is weird, but this is how it goes. This is how I am. This is what I've chosen to believe in. And that's fine. You get to choose what you're going to believe in. And the beauty of it is when you choose to allow yourself, when you choose to, most of the time, sorry about that, a little battery failure, and we're back. was talking about we get to choose what we believe, which is beautiful because and that back to what I was saying before about if we just would allow ourselves to be who we are, just let yourself be you instead of trying to uphold some other standard, some other thing that you think you should be, something that you desire to be out of a sense of duty, or something that you're afraid you'll be judged for not doing. That's the worst. If you just allow yourself to be who you are and let that be it, number one, you grow because everything you do is now based on true internal faith. It's based on your own belief system, the things that you've decided to believe in. And you know what else I really hate, which goes along with this? We have this saying in the church and in Christianity and in most religions, I think, that you don't get to pick and choose what you believe in. Yes, you do. You absolutely do. Sorry, I have to do this like the face thing, the into the camera thing at least once in every video. Makes for great screenshots. Yes, you absolutely do get to pick and choose what you believe in. That's the whole point. You get to have the faith to say, I believe this. I'm not sure about that, but I believe this, and I'm going to use that as my cornerstone. I'm going to go from there. That's it. I have things about the Mormon Church, about Christianity in general, that I am not sure about. But there are other things that I strongly believe in, that I've chosen to put my faith in. It has nothing to do with me picking and choosing because I want to, live a terrible life and live a double life sort of thing. No, I am being more honest with myself when I choose and decide that this is what I believe, this is what I believe, this is what I believe, and these other things over here I'm trying to figure out, and I really understand that. But the moment that I stop trying to uphold these things and just sort of fake it till I make it, which is also terrible, the moment I stop trying to uphold these things over here and I just let them be, and I go to them when I need to sort of dig into that, but I don't try to be be showy with my faith. I don't try and say, oh no, I believe all the things. I'm totally good. All the things, total testimony, everything's good. If I don't, because that's called being dishonest. And regardless of what it looks like to other people, if you say that you have testimony and you don't, you're not getting any stronger. In fact, you're getting weaker. So again, back to my point. If we will just be who we are, then the fruit of that, our natural actions, will display who we actually are. And who we are, this is going to sound so redundant and dumb, but I want you to understand what I mean by this. We are who we are. You are who you are. You're not anybody else. You're not me. You're not your mom. You're not your parents. You're not your leaders at church. You're not your teachers at school. You're not your instructors. You're not your boss. You are you. And you have certain beliefs and certain understandings and certain lack of belief and lack of faith, and that's all you. Well, that's who you are, and that's important. Because we all have our own path. But what's so detrimental to your growth as a person, and I'm speaking from experience here, is trying to act like you're someone else. Trying to act like you're this person that's got it all together. Now, quick caveat. This is not an excuse to air out your dirty laundry. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is being honest. If you have doubts, maybe it's not always appropriate to share them, but at least acknowledge that you have them, at least to yourself, right? If you believe something, don't hold it, don't hide it. Let people know that you believe it. That's how you know that you believe it. That's how you know. Because it becomes a natural extension of what you do. It just becomes part of you. And it's not about, moving forward and I got to do all the things. I got to make sure I'm never late for church. And I got to make sure that I do my home teaching every month. And I got to make sure that I pay my tithing on time. And I got to make sure that I pay my fast offerings every Sunday. And make sure that I fast every Sunday. I got to make sure that I take the sacrament every Sunday. I got to make sure I sustain and blah, 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 and do my calling and blah, blah, blah. No. All that stuff is good. All that stuff is important. What's more important, and all of that stuff goes totally out the window, if you don't have a base, if you don't have something that you can fall back on. One of the Might get emotional here in a second, so just preparing you. One of the turning points in my life was my freshman year in college. I took a class about a philosophy class, Intro to Philosophy. And we talked about Socrates. Socrates is my hero, by the way. Socrates was talking to this kid named Euthyphro. And he asked this question. This is a classic question in philosophy. And we studied a lot in philosophy. And the question is, piety. He's talking about piety, being the act of being pious, which goes perfectly along with what we're talking about here. He says, are the things that are pious, this is what Socrates says, are they pious because the gods said so? Or do the gods say so because they're pious? Meaning, does the piety of these acts transcend the gods that we seem to be being pious towards? Or are we just doing what they asked us to do? Right? And Euthyphro sort of danced around the question, and he talked about, oh, you're a blasphemer, and you're all these terrible things, and they end up killing Socrates. Okay? The problem that Euthyphro had is, well, it wasn't actually a problem for him because he ended up winning. He ended up not dying. But the problem philosophically that Euthyphro had is that he didn't have a base to fall back on. He was trying to outlogic Socrates. And Socrates, he said himself, the only reason why I'm the smartest guy in the room is because I know that I'm not. So I'll say that one more time, just to make sure that some of you will have studied Socrates, but some of you haven't. He said, the only reason I know that I'm the smartest guy in the room is because I know that I'm not. Meaning, he knows where his base level is. He knows what he is, he knows what he isn't. And then he lets that come out naturally. He lets who he is be shown forth. He doesn't have to hold up any sort of standard, try and uphold things for anybody else. He's living for himself, but he's honestly trying to improve himself for the sake of himself, not for the sake of impressing anybody else. The problem with Euthyphro is that when backed into a corner about his beliefs, he had nothing to stand on. So Socrates just wipes the floor with him through the whole argument because he can't fall back on anything. Euthyphro can't fall back on anything. That was an incredibly transformative moment in my life because I realized that I needed to know what my fallback point was. I didn't know at that time what my fallback point was. And wow. This is a very personal thing that I'm sharing with you. Anyway, sorry. The experience of discovering what my fallback points were was one of the most powerful and liberating experiences that I've ever had in my life. And time again, since then, I have been able to fall back on those things, and they are rock solid. And there's nothing that anybody can do to change them. And I'll tell you why. My core beliefs, my baseline, my bedrock, isn't logical. It's not based on a proof. It's not based on a theorem. It's not based on what somebody else said. It's not based on a book. It's not based on what a religious person has said. It's based on a choice. I choose to draw a line here in the sand. I choose to believe certain things, and I own it. This is my line. I believe in God. That's my line. You can say anything you want. You can logic your way around it, and I'll have a totally philosophical conversation with you, but at the end of the day, I don't back any further than this line. It's because of a choice that I made. It's not based on anything else. And you can't change that. And the minute that I started to live based on only that, based on that basic assumption and not trying to uphold all these things that I didn't really think that I really understood or believed in, not that I thought they were wrong, but that I just didn't really have enough information to really understand, naturally my actions became more real, more authentic. I was having conversations with people. I was saying the same words, but I felt them. I felt myself come through in a way that I'd never felt before. I was secure in the authenticity of what I was saying. And there was no fear. There's no fear. And it's because I know what everything's based on. And I know that I can't be backed any further from that. But the point of this whole thing, and I apologize for getting emotional and going down that whole thing. The point of this whole thing is, if you want to become a certain thing, if you want your actions to be a certain way, or if maybe you're religious and you want to do good deeds and you want to follow the commandments, right? The 10 Commandments. Great. You could follow the 10 Commandments for the rest of your life, and just like the initial analogy, you could never get faith. You could never really achieve a faithful status. So that initial analogy was, I could take my umbrella outside and have it not be raining. In the same way, you could do all the things. You can show up to church. You could sing the songs, stump the Bible, do your thing, and never make it to the next step based on your own doctrine. You'd never make it past that first bit. Just doing the things. It's called going through the motions. You'll never make it past that. However, the instant that you turn your attention to becoming what you need to become, the rest of that stuff it just happens. It's a byproduct of the internal shift. It's like my mom always used to say, clean the corners and the middle will take care of itself. It's the same thing. Focus on what's important. Focus on the core piece of what you want. Focus on what you want. And the rest of all that stuff it'll just happen. But you have to let yourself be who you are. You have to let yourself be who you are. And own it. And then the rest of it doesn't matter. It doesn't. Because you'll naturally grow, and sometimes you allow yourself to be who you are, and especially after a long time of kind of hiding, you can kind of react and you kind of go overboard. And then you start to make some adjustments and you learn, oh, that's not really me. I just thought that was me. Okay, so we'll kind of bring it back in and become this, we figure out who we are. The rest of it takes care of itself. So I apologize, this video took forever. But the point that I wanted to make is that we can't put the cart before the horse and try and focus so much on what we're doing and so little on what we're becoming, who we are. Because it's more important that we become something. And the thing that we become, the person that we become, the thing that we represent, naturally will produce the results that we're looking for. And I know this is scary to think about, but think about this. If it's not you, then you're lying to yourself. If it's not you at all, you gotta figure out who you are. You gotta have that base. You gotta know you gotta be true to yourself. Because you can't be true to anything else, to anyone else, to any other thought, theory, belief system, anything until you're true to yourself. You have to go inward first before you can go outward. That's really all that I have to say. Focus on becoming instead of focusing on doing. Because then it just becomes natural. That's all I got.